So how do you know how burned out exactly you are? There is some research that two psychologists did, Herbert Freudenberger and Gail North, and they've outlined these 12 stages, levels, 12 phases of burnout. And what's particularly interesting to note about that is that these phases don't necessarily follow neatly in order one by one, but some people can actually have several of these, more of these at one time. But let's just go through them one by one so that you can be on the lookout about which of these you might be falling into. So the first one, and this may affect people that have low self-esteem or that are in a situation that triggers low self-esteem, like when people are being bullied or when a manager or when a partner makes unreasonable demands that we can't actually cope with. We may start to doubt ourselves. And what we may then start doing is to demonstrate that we are capable, to demonstrate that we are worth. And this is why burnout tends to hit the best and the most capable and more loyal employees, those that are actually enthusiastic and accept a lot of responsibility. Because if we are in an environment where unreasonable demands are being made or where there's hyper competition, then we may feel forced into, needing to prove our capabilities. So obviously this can also affect people that are excessively ambitious or that have perfectionist tendencies. So I used to be a great one in this. And we may feel this desire to constantly prove ourselves and may fall into being so determined that, there's a compulsion to overwork, to overdo, to overperfect. And it feels like we need to constantly show to our colleagues, to our managers, and also to ourselves that we are doing such an excellent job in each and every way and that we are flawless. Second one, working harder, and somehow this is also very similar to the first one. When we have really high expectations of ourselves, because maybe, that's how we learn to do things. Maybe parents had very high expectations of us. Maybe we just know that we are capable of so much more, then we may take on more than we can actually chew. And when we realize perhaps that we can't do it all, sometimes we may be embarrassed that we actually can't handle everything, and we can become obsessed with proving that we can. And this also affects people. Actually, I had quite a number of clients that were managers, were a little bit obsessed with handling everything themselves, or they had employees or staff members that they didn't think were doing a good enough job. And so sometimes when their timelines, the manager will actually rework. Instead of passing it back to the staff member, they will rework it themselves. And then within that, they're taking on basically the job of everyone else. Instead of putting the responsibility back on the other person, they're doing everything for everyone. And people also do this in relationships when perhaps their partner doesn't do things or doesn't feel as capable, or there can be lots of interesting dynamics going on there. But it's very important that we set some boundaries and take only responsibility for ourselves, and not have this idea that we are irreplaceable and only we can do it, and only we can do it to the required standard. If that happens, then if we have a tendency to overwork, be very perfectionistic, then we may also have an inability to switch off from things. So we're constantly thinking how we can still do it better, or even how we get everything done, because we have these endless lists, because we can't say no, or we can't delegate. So that's a really tricky one, really important one to watch out for. Another one is neglecting your own needs. Obviously, this is a huge one. When people are in this phase of burnout, their schedules have no time for anything except work. And we tend to dismiss everything else as not quite as important and neglect such basic needs as sleeping or eating or socializing or even getting some fresh air, going for a walk, or even being with family. And we may tell ourselves, if we are in this phase, that these sacrifices are somehow proof of our amazing performance. Well, I have been there, done that, so I'm laughing. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at, how easy it is for us to slip into this one. And especially when you're very passionate or very loyal to your work. Stage 4, displacement of conflicts. As you can see, there are quite significant conflicts arising here. If we're doing the first 3 phases quite well, then there is a conflict because we do have needs and our body has needs, and conflicts will arise from this. And perhaps there are other conflicts, and sometimes we can be masters in avoiding these conflicts. Say our manager or our partner makes unreasonable demands and we know we can't keep up, but somehow we just don't want to face the conflict. And we may suppress or dismiss them, which then, however, makes us feel quite threatened because our body is changing. It's under a lot of stress, so it goes into a fight and flight response. If we don't have time to relax or to sleep enough, we can become quite panicky or jittery. And we may be aware that something isn't quite right, but because we are under so much stress, we can't actually see the source of the real problem. And perhaps dealing with the root cause of the conflict or of the problem is so distressing for us because we know it's going to set off a crisis. Maybe we need to tell our manager that it's impossible to do this. Or maybe we need to confront a colleague that's stressing us out. And all of this is even more threatening. And so often at this stage, we begin to have physical symptoms that are beginning to emerge. Might be digestive issues, there might be skin problems, there might be a racing mind, maybe we can no longer sleep at night. We may have tension headaches. There is so many different physical symptoms, how the body is telling us that there are conflicting parts on there on the inside. Now, if we absolutely want to keep going with overworking and overdoing things, then at this point we have to revise even our own values. If we are avoiding to face that conflict and are denying ourselves the basic physical needs, then our perception is going to become very distorted. And we need to basically revise our inner value system. So all the things that may have mattered to us, like spending time with friends or hobbies, everything needs to now be dismissed, just sacrificed in view of higher goals, might be to meet that project outcome or that new job, proving it to our manager or maybe proving it to our partner that we can just deal with it all. And the only standard for evaluating our self-worth now becomes whether we can achieve certain outer outcomes like getting the job done or getting the certain income level or whatever it might be that we are sacrificing for. And we are becoming increasingly emotionally blunted at this stage. We need to keep denying the emerging problems to go further into burnout. So at this stage, because we are under this chronic stress and our nervous system is chronically taxed, we are becoming very tunnel visioned, very intolerant. And we may begin to perceive others as our colleagues, our partners, our collaborators, our people in our environment. We may perceive them as being stupid or demanding or lazy or undisciplined. and having any kind of social contact, it begins to feel almost unbearable because we are becoming more and more cynical and quite resentful. And now some people will express that resentment as anger, and other people will not express it but will internalize it and direct it against themselves. And we may be perceiving that all these problems are stemming from having too little time or too much work. And what we can't see in this phase is that it's actually caused by the lifestyle changes, by the chronic stress, by denying our own basic needs for rejuvenation, rest, and so on. If we keep going, then the next stage is that we become completely withdrawn. We completely reduce any social contact to an absolute minimum, become very isolated, and beginning to wall ourselves off. And we may increasingly feel that there's no hope and that we are a bit lost for direction. So we become obsessed with doing everything to the dot at work or on the job or, in the household or wherever it might be. And we become very cynical and critical. And to release that inner pressure, we may now engage in using drugs, alcohol, or somehow an obsessive behavior to release that stress. Now, phase 8, other people will notice obvious behavioral changes in us. It's almost like we are not ourselves anymore, and even our immediate social circles can no longer overlook that we aren't quite ourselves. We might be grumpy, we might be very withdrawn. Our friends may notice we're not available anymore and we're very negative. If we were previously engaged and lively, now we're just shy, apathic. We might be very fearful or very critical, and on the inside, we are beginning to feel increasingly worried and worthless. We have a lot of self-doubt because it just seems we can't cope with all these demands. And the next stage is depersonalization. Now we can see that here it really becomes critical and intense. It's when we lose contact with ourselves. We don't even know who we are anymore. We can see neither ourselves or other people as valuable, and we don't even know what our needs are anymore at this stage. Our perception of time becomes very interesting at this point. It's almost like we're living one day at a time, maybe 1 hour at a time. It's just pushing through. We don't know what happens next. We become quite volatile, and our life becomes very mechanical. At this point, it's almost like we are this little robot. And also inner emptiness just becomes relentlessly expansive at this point, and we almost have a compulsion at this point to keep doing things, to just keep active, so we don't have to face this inner void. And we may have out of control behaviors such as exaggerated, like overeating, drug and alcohol use, or almost like sex addictions, any kind of addictions. And leisure time is just dead time. We are just sort of sitting there staring at the wall. Very advanced stage of burnout, dangerous. In the next stage, depression just sets in, and this is really already a burnout syndrome where when we've been previously overwhelmed, we now just become indifferent, hopeless, totally exhausted. Our future just seems like nothing. There's no hope, no light at the end of the tunnel. We may feel very agitated on the inside, or we may feel completely apathic, and life has absolutely no meaning for us. Now, when we hit the full burnout syndrome, we may just feel a need to escape. Somehow we just have thoughts of running away, just getting into a car and driving, may have suicidal thoughts. This is a very dangerous state. And if you are feeling that you are mentally, physically, spiritually exhausted and just have no way out, it's very important that you do contact the crisis service. Do not suffer this alone. You do need attention, you need medical attention, and you do need help. So still you might be neglecting your needs, but you absolutely need support. So these are the 12 stages of burnout. Obviously, this is not something to take lightly. I encourage you to definitely not get to the last 3 stages, which are very dangerous. How can you transform your patterns, your internal unconscious patterns that are driving you up the ladder, the burnout ladder, into success that is actually sustainable? And how can you regain your inner peace and your energy? I've made a whole training video, a breakthrough video that outlines the steps for this, and I absolutely encourage you to please watch it if you feel that you're somewhere here on the burnout spectrum that's getting to an advanced stage. It's okay to ask for help, and help is accessible to you, so please reach out, whether it's to friends, family,